Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Valenti, and welcome to another episode of Backlot Pass. You might remember today's guest from the late 90s NBC sitcom Union Square, and these days, she runs her own award-winning yoga studio, Liberation Yoga, which was founded in 2004. The one and only Christine Burke. Christine, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to be talking with you.
Thank you, Sam. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, of course. Like I said, just truly an honor to have you on, and there's so much to get to here. So first off, just how did you get interested in going into acting?
Well, let's see. I my first actual, I guess, on stage performance, I was in middle school, early high school, and I was cast in The Wizard of Oz as Dorothy, but decided I wanted to play Toto. So, some of my strange choices that I've made in my life, but for whatever reason, I was bitten by, the theater bug, and I thought that would be interesting. My mom and I still laugh about that to this day. So it was pretty early, but I actually kind of forayed into dancing, and I was a dancer through school and got into college and started to explore dancing and fine art, and then realized that what I was really, really being called to was acting, and I kind of kept sort of just pushing it off to the side. So I switched that, and that was my focus, and that's what I studied and got my degree in and started into my career, basically in college. I think actually, to give you the why, I had a lot of different creative aspirations and interests, and I thought as an actor, you could be all of these parts, that you could play so many different things and so many different sorts of characters and understand psychology, which I really love, imagining what it's like to be another person and live their life. And I love that idea. And I love that it didn't pigeonhole me into one thing. I thought I could be many vocations under one career as an actor. So yeah, that was pretty much my memory of how that began.
Now, when you were growing up, was acting like was that always the thing that you kind of envision yourself doing, or was there like at any other point was there something else that you thought, oh well, I might actually want to do this or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there were so many different things that caught my eye. They were all creative. I wasn't really, I don't ever remember, except for maybe one tiny summer where I did a lot of experiments. I was never going to be a scientist or a doctor. It was always writing, acting, music, dancing, that sort of thing. But I think I really thought I was going to be a writer. When I think about the thing that was sort of consistent, and now I do write, and I'm writing more, and that's been great. But I think it was that. And then once I was on stage just a few times, it felt very natural and it felt very connected to people. I loved being connected with the other actors and director. I love being connected to the audience and sharing, being a human. So those little bits and pieces really just started to kind of push me that way, even though at first I would never have said when I was little, I'm not one of the, wasn't one of the kids that, do you want to be an actor? Do you want to be a movie star? No, I like to be there, but I thought I would write, I think, mainly.
Well, that's cool to hear about because obviously, you've gone on to like write some books, about yoga and stuff, which is
Yeah,
super cool.
yeah, thank you.
So let's get into Union Square now. How did that role on that show, like how did that kind of come about? I mean, this is a big show on NBC. So how did that role come about for you?
Yeah, it was a big deal. So I was in New York. Actually, I finished school here in Southern California in San Diego, and left to drive across country to New York, and spent years in New York making my way, now ironically, around the Union Square area. Worked as a waitress a lot. Started to act and make my, living and make my way as an actress in New York in theater. And then I had this dream, like a sleeping dream, not a Martin Luther King Jr. dream, a sleeping dream, that I needed to move to LA. And it was a little strange because I had spent a lot of time, making a way for myself in the New York theater scene, and I loved it. But I felt this call so strongly that I up and moved within a month, and I didn't know anybody in LA. So I was starting all over again. And that was sort of, a strange place to land after having built to something there. But there was something else going on. It was intuition. It was, the universe calling, and I picked up the phone. And so I find myself in LA, and it takes me about another year to really start to get into the theater scene in LA. And my agent in New York was not working in LA, so I didn't have any representation or anything like that. And I started to do some plays I was very proud of here. I was very lucky to work with some fantastic people. I had wonderful parts. And little by little, I ended up doing this fantastic play called Francis and the President. My agent then found me there. I had a wonderful relationship with them, and I started going out for a lot of pilots and things. So when the pilot came for Carrie in Union Square, I remember so well. I picked out this shirt that I had from a vintage store in New York that had a big piece of pizza on it. And my hair was really dark black at the time. And I had this messy bun and my motorcycle boots and this skirt. And I looked like I looked when I waitressed in New York at some of the places in the East Village. And I felt so at home with this character and this part. And it was a fantastic experience. It was a very big thing for me. It was my first huge kind of pilot in front of a lot of big name audience members, including the director, Jim Burrows, who is so fantastic, from Taxi and so many amazing shows, Cheers. So it went great because I felt like I was on a stage in theater, and there was enough of an audience that it felt like that. So despite the fact that I messed my lines up 3 or 4 times in the audition, they thought that I was so right for the part that they just kept letting me start over again. And then I nailed it, and it was so much fun. And I left, and I was driving home, and it was the days of payphones and beepers. And so my manager beeped me, get to a phone quick. And before I even got home, I stopped at a payphone at a gas station, and I called, and she said, "You got it." And that was my, it was just right early on in me going out for television. And the part just clicked. The cast was tremendous. And it was an unbelievable experience. It was really fun.
Gosh, that's so awesome. I can only imagine the feeling of how this show, obviously big nationwide audience, in between Friends and Seinfeld, 2 of the biggest shows in the history of American television, and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to be like right there on everyone's TV screens. Like, I can only imagine the feeling.
Yeah, it was very surreal because I'd been acting, quite a while, and I'd done some independent films and things, but I wasn't doing really any television, just independent films, theater, that sort of thing. And it was very big and fast, right? All of a sudden it was very big and fast, and definitely exciting. And one of the funny things about it was, as I said, originally I thought being an actress, I'd get to play a lot of different parts, which I have. I played a lot of different things, and some really stretched me pretty far. But the one that put me on television in that primetime spot was playing a waitress, which is what I had basically worked for my entire life, because I've been a waitress so much. So it felt very second nature to get into that rhythm, and I thought it was kind of a kick that was the sort of breakthrough TV role. And I remember walking my dog one night, the first week that it was airing, and I was walking by someone's house, and their windows were open, the curtains were open, and I could see the show on in their living room, and I could see me, and I was walking my dog, and I thought, wow, that's something. So yeah, it was an exciting moment for sure.
And I think that's just so great how you were able to really relate to to that character, and you could kind of use the experiences that you had previously, while you're playing the role. And I think that's so cool, and it really adds to the performance, because when I'm watching you in those episodes, it just seems so natural. You're just like the perfect fit.
Oh, thank you. I love that character. And you probably didn't get to see later on, since they're not all easy to find. But there's one where my band, because she's in a girl band, and I love music and I love girl bands. That's like the center of the story, and you get to see the band and me playing some music. I'm not really playing, but and that's kind of I think that might be my favorite episode, because Carrie got to be sort of front and center outside of her waitress diner self. So if you ever come across it, I have them all on VHS, if you could believe it.
Really?
And I have nothing to play them in. Yeah.
You need to find a way, because like I said, there's like a good, there's a little chunk of episodes, which is what
Yeah.
I've seen online. And again, and I mean, there's quite a lot of people who watch them, they get a good amount of views. You need to find a way to upload those episodes that you have, so then we can get the whole series.
I should try to do that. Yeah, my daughter started rooting around online and found them, a few more maybe, but yeah, that would be fun to do. The show being in the middle of those fantastic, iconic shows was both a gift and a curse, because there was a lot of pressure on Union Square, and they were really trying, the writers who were so talented and just such an incredible group of people, but trying to find the voice, trying to trust it when it was in a place that had so much pressure. So I certainly wish it had gone on longer, because we loved working together, but it had one blessed season.
Yep. And I think just overall, just the show, it has such a unique history, and it's, because there's the original pilot that Mel Gorham was on,
Yeah.
and then the show kind of got changed around a bit, and then Constance Marie, many people know from George Lopez, she
Yes.
came on instead. And when the show aired, and it's kind of the overall history of the show, it's very fascinating, kind of with that whole kind of change there.
Yeah, definitely. It was built around Mel and for her. And then there was, and I wasn't inside those rooms and the conversations and why things got shifted and changed exactly, but I do think it caused some, kind of the roots of the show got a little bit jostled around as they were trying to, put those pieces together. But it is really interesting. And I think one of the things that was so excellent about it, that was maintained regardless of the change, was the ensemble feeling.
Mm.
And one of my favorite actors and people in the whole world, who played Albie, Jonathan Slavin, became a friend of mine. And he's been continuing to do fantastic and wonderful things. But it was interesting that the group of he and I, and Vince, like there was a little nugget of the core of the diner that maintained, and then a few people, got changed out and kind of rotating in, but we still held together this feeling of, of a group. And that's a special feeling, when you get to act in an ensemble like that.
Yes, absolutely. But and I know what there actually should have been. There needs to be a spin-off of Union Square, and it follows Carrie, but now she's a yoga teacher. There needs to be that spin-off.
Okay, Sam, you write it and give me a call. I'll do it.
Yep, exactly. And then we'll get all the cast to come back for guest appearances.
I love those things. Yeah. That'd be wonderful.
Yep, exactly. But and I just want to say this, I want to say this, between you and like Jennifer Aniston and Jerry Seinfeld, I'm taking you 100%.
Bless you. Thank you. That's quite, I'm up there in good company. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Well, I love seeing Jerry Seinfeld. His dressing room was really near mine, and he would drive a lot of different cars each day, always really nice cars. And I always thought, oh, I'm parking next to Jerry Seinfeld. That's fun.
Well, so I mean, I actually think Jerry Seinfeld was probably like, wow, I get to park next to Christine Burke. Oh my gosh.
You're probably right.
So now I have to bring up this other role you had. And it's on another sitcom, and this one is an ABC sitcom. You got to work with a pretty famous comedian these days, just a guy named Kevin Hart, which is pretty cool.
Oh, you did some research.
I did, yeah, and I'm really glad I came across this. The show called The Big House. This is kind of Kevin Hart in his younger years, aired on ABC. And you appear in the very first scene of the show, which was so cool. What was that whole experience like?
Gosh, that's fascinating, and I want to see that again, because it's been forever. I haven't seen that. So, well, first of all, Kevin Hart is all heart. I do remember that. I mean, there's a lot of things that I did at that time, and I've done so much since that my mind doesn't remember all the details of everything. But I remember thinking that Kevin Hart was just, such a good person and kind. And then one of my everybody in the show was hilarious and really kind and really sweet. And I was very excited about being on it. And I don't think that it was ever meant to be more than a guest part. But what happened was they filmed the pilot, and then I don't know what the reason was or what the disruption was, but they ended up coming back and filming the pilot again later. And they called me up much later. And I remember that I had cut my hair really differently from how the first pilot was. And that I was fussing around trying to think if I could make it look like I looked in the first one so that they'd make sure and keep me in for that second one. And ultimately, it didn't really matter. Everybody looked a little bit different. My part was essentially the same, but they had made some changes in the writing, of the whole show and so forth. And it was a great experience. I mean, I would have, loved if that had ever been meant to be more of a regular part, because I loved him and his humor and the whole vibe of the set and everything. It was good. Yeah. Well treated. Good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I remember coming across it. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool. That you got to work with them. I thought that was awesome because I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of his as well. So super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wonderful to get to be in the presence of people who have great talent and are the people that you hope they are when you meet them. And he
Yep.
was definitely one. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Mhm.
So now I want to talk to you about liberation yoga. I want to kind of hear the whole background, the whole story of how it came together. So this is kind of a two-part question here.
Sure.
How did you get interested in yoga first off? And then from there, how did liberation yoga begin?
So, okay. When I was in New York as an actress, I took my first yoga class, and it was a very, what do I want to say? Incensey, hippy dippy, warm and fuzzy kind of class. It was not like a hot yoga exercise class, nothing like that. It was in a beautiful place called Integral Yoga, very spiritually deep and connected and rooted in the ancient hatha practice. And when I first walked in, it was very dark and everybody's wearing really loose clothing, and you just felt like you were transported. And here I am in New York, working in the East Village as a waitress, acting, working really hard, and finding my way, finding out who I am, and trying to keep my brain, together in a big city. So when I walked in there and I was enveloped in this kind of cave and started practicing and felt like I was sort of rolling around in my pajamas, just stretching, I thought, this is amazing. I want to do this all the time. And I remember when I went out and I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and my skin looked great and my eyes looked so clear, and I felt at home in myself, which I also felt on stage. Not as much always auditioning, that part's a little tricky. But in the zone of the work, I would feel extremely at home. And then in the yoga, I felt like that. So I started to go off and on to different classes in the city, and really fell in love with it. And it really pulled me into a place. I was not religious growing up. I wasn't raised, very religiously, but I had a strong desire to connect to something spiritually. And yoga really did that for me. It gave a way to be in my body as a dancer or just a human who wants to feel good in their body, and also a way to be connected to something, beyond myself. So it was really kind of meeting all of those, my throat's really dry, pieces at the same time. I've been having kind of seasonal changes in my throat dryness. Oh goodness, Sam, hold on. I'm sorry. Can you pause?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I got a real dry throat all of a sudden. Like I need a lozenge. Hang on one second, can you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no worries at all.
Hold on, everybody. Oh, wait, I think I'm okay. I'm okay. It was like really big dry wind went in my throat. Okay, so anyway, that was the beginning, and it really caught me. So when I moved to LA, I started to practice again a little bit, but I didn't really find a studio or anything that I was connected deeply to until I met my husband. And when I met him, he took me to a place called the Center for Yoga in Larchmont here. And I fell madly in love with this teacher who was platonically 75 years old. And he had been an actor and had been in really bad shape, smoked like crazy, was drinking a lot, was kind of falling into disrepair. And he found yoga and he became a yoga teacher within 5 years and was this incredibly vital, just luminescent being. So Gary, my husband, and I would take his class all of the time. And I started to feel really drawn to yoga, like deeply was pulling me. At the same time, I'm acting, I'm on Union Square, I'm doing plays here, I'm doing guest parts, I'm doing some indie films and things. But all the while, yoga is keeping me together, mind, body, and spirit, giving me a sense of wholeness and consistency and groundedness. And then I start to imagine myself teaching classes. Like it just sort of comes into me, and I'm in the car driving and I'll hear myself talking about a class or sharing a metaphor for life, or, just kind of fantasizing and getting these inspirations. And they're coming more and more and more to the point that I start feeling like, I think I need to take a yoga teacher training. This is pulling me. So at the same time, we were doing some kind of work exchange work at this yoga studio. And little by little, through a couple of different twists and turns, we ended up managing the studio. And my husband he passed away a year and a half ago. And he was, to this day, the most tremendous actor I have ever seen. If you want to go look him up, he's Gary McCleary, and a tremendous director. And so he really pulled out of me as an actor more than I had ever discovered. But he also really introduced me to the yoga that was the turning point for me starting to drift in that direction. So once Union Square was over and I was doing different guest parts and I was getting some different roles that were mostly fun and wonderful, but I was also feeling a little disconnected from myself. The industry was kind of crashing in on me. I was up for every big part you can imagine, from Will and Grace to Dharma and Greg, at the time, all of them. And I felt like I was sort of under this microscope. And anytime I didn't get a part, it was like, well, what's wrong? Not just like, well, what's right about this, but always like, what's wrong? And let's figure it out. Like it's a problem to solve. And it wasn't feeling like I was as whole and integrated and comfortable in myself as I had been feeling before. When I was on stage, I felt great. But everything else and the rigmarole of the, business was just kind of weighing on me. So as that was happening, I started to take a teacher training. I felt so good in there. I was asked to teach classes. I started to teach. And then at the Center for Yoga at that time, we ended up managing it, running it, and opening our own theater, Salvation Theater in Silver Lake. And so we're doing our own productions there, which was tremendous. And at one point, the Center for Yoga was struggling, and there was a change in the ownership, and they decided they were going to make a big change, and it was on the verge of being sold. And Gary and I tried to actually buy the studio, and we were sort of sideswiped for YogaWorks. YogaWorks bought the studio, and we decided we need our own. And we had our theater, and we had a lot of students and a lot of people saying, you've got to keep going. Please open your own studio. So I had a big following of students as a teacher, and we had a large community, and we decided to do it. And we jumped in and found some incredible investors to help us launch. And we scoured the city to find the place that felt the best to us and was available. And we found our place on La Brea Avenue. And in 2004, we opened. And it was a huge leap, because to open that, I had to leave acting because I couldn't do all of it. And so I told my manager, my lovely manager, Sandy Joseph, and my agents at Abrams, and they said, I've got to do this. And they said, I don't think you should do that, because it's very hard to come back in. And I said, I know, but I just feel called to do it. It's my soul is saying go. And I never regretted that at all. It was very hard running your own business. I knew nothing about it. It was 24/7. You know, we had a whole space to create, but it was tremendous. And it was this thing that just started to kind of unfold, and we ended up, as you mentioned, winning awards because it was a very unique studio. It had a garden outside that was very organic and natural, and an indoor studio that was like the first place I mentioned, kind of like a cave. And people came, and it was, yeah, it was something I'm very, very, very proud of. And teaching, it's not unlike acting in the sense that you're connecting with people, but you're yourself, you know, and you're bringing in the wisdom and the practice of yoga, and you get to share that very directly. And I love that about it. And I love doing something in the world where I get to see the impact. You know, when you're acting, you know, you're making an impact, and you see it in different ways. One of the things that I love about teaching yoga and meditation, mindfulness, and all of that is it's very real time. You know, I'll share, there's energy back. We're in this relationship back and forth, and get to connect with the people that way, which means a lot to me.
Wow, that, that's really great to hear about it. And I think it's so cool how you've really been able to grow, spiritually throughout, all this stuff that you've been doing. I think that's really great.
Thank you. And, you know, the studio, starting it was such a risk, and there was a bit of conflict because once we opened this, I mean, there's a lot of interesting juicy details in there that someday I'll write about, but once we opened the studio, our theater, Salvation Theater in Silver Lake, managing both of them was becoming increasingly challenging. And then the rent prices went skyrocketing in Silver Lake at that time. It became very, happening. And so we ended up ultimately having, after almost 5 years, letting go of the theater and just focusing on liberation yoga. But we did some performances there too. And we had huge parties where people would play music. We had an art gallery that, featured artists that were in liberation students or community in the neighborhood. And then we had to move it. And I don't know if you know about that part or not, but it was up on La Brea Avenue in the Hollywood area of LA. And after 15 years, again, the rents started spiking dramatically, and we were getting priced out of the neighborhood. So we had to find very quickly a new space, and we moved to the space that we're at now, which is further down La Brea, just coincidentally, and a very beautiful space as well. But we were only there 9 months when COVID hit. And that has been very, very difficult, very, very difficult time to go through that as a small business.
Yeah. So what was that whole like moving process like? I mean, you're at one location for a long time, and then it's like, oh boy, now we have to move all of a sudden. What was that process like?
Well, there was a lot of tussle with the landlords about it because we have been such great tenants, and we had literally grown this garden studio. We had hummingbirds and trees where you're practicing. It had fountains. There were murals all over. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been there a long, long time. And, not something where you just came in and sort of decorated, but like grew. So that was some of its specialness. And of some of the awards that we won, a lot of them focused on the energy of the space and what it felt like to be there. So the physical location was really the heartbeat, of the place, it felt. And everybody would say when we found out we had to move, liberation can be liberation, however and wherever. It's you, it's Gary, it's the teachers, it's the students. And I agree for sure that this, beautiful relationship symbiosis that everybody had and the welcoming atmosphere could be transplanted. But I was very attached to that place, to the point that when they poured new concrete in the front of it, I had run out and written some Sanskrit and a poem and put my feet in it. So it was like dense matter. And finding out we had to leave it seemed impossible. But once I started really meditating and pondering on the word liberation, liberation is to free ourselves, right? To not be tied down or anchored in suffering for whatever reason. I mean, we go through suffering in life no matter what, but to add to it, you know, by attachments or limitations is not part of the yoga practice. We're trying to lighten those up, right? Be humans in a physical body having a spiritual experience and not be weighed down by our matter, so to speak. So I started really thinking about that. And I thought, well, liberation is an experience of elevating yourself through yoga. We use yoga so you feel good in your body and you feel good in your heart and your mind, but it can't be that this physical space is the source of so much suffering for me, you know, or anyone or everyone. So I started to wrap my head around that. Gary did too. And when we found this place, it was really at the last minute because we had to get out at this point. We were not finding a place. And really divine happenstance, which I've had a lot of in my life, and I'm really grateful for it. Kind of waking up and having a coincidental moment where, you know, you open up, you go online and there's an ad you never saw before and you follow it. And it was like that. And so I teach at a wonderful girls' school, Marlborough School here. And I was teaching a class of my teenage students. And I suddenly see this thing come up and I said, I have to go look at this space. So class finishes and I run out and I see the space and I know this is it. And we have literally like a week to make a decision at this point. And I called Gary and I said, I found it. You got to come and look at it. And we decided, yep, this is it. And it was a tile floor of all sorts of tile, like nothing you could practice yoga on because it had been a tile store before. So we had to put a floor in and paint and bring all of the plants. And the move was ginormous. We had so much help from the community, so much love, everybody painting, everybody moving. You know, it was really the best of a bad thing. And it took a lot of guts too, because at that time I thought, you know, should we keep going or is it time for a change? You know, what's my responsibility to students, to ourselves? And we decided we wanted to keep going. We wanted to keep it together, but it was a risk. And really, it was pretty spotty for the first month. People got disoriented. They didn't know where we were. We hadn't found new people yet. But right when it started to hit this groove again and people were getting into it, okay, it's different, but we can do it and we like it. And right then, boom, all of a sudden lockdown. So I would say that you're catching me at a really interesting moment with liberation. It's been 5 years in that new place, well, like 4.5. And a good chunk of them, you know, 3 years of them is in this up and down, open, closed. We did do our classes on Zoom. We have a core group of people that continued and new people started to flow in, but we hadn't gotten our roots, you know, like fully dug in there. And then, as I mentioned, my husband passed away quite unexpectedly. He had a heart attack and it was devastating. It's my soulmate of 26 years and my business partner, my yoga partner, my acting partner, my, you know, father of my child. So it's been me carrying liberation forward this last 1.5 years. And much like 20 years ago when I left acting, I find myself poised about keeping the space. And there's a lot of changes going on in the studio and the space. And I'm looking at expanding into doing more retreats and writing more books and teaching in different ways and considering that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's you know, no, I think it's, you know, crazy that you know that you've had to deal, you know, really in just a really what in the grand scheme of things is a relatively short time period. You know, you've had to deal with a lot of challenges, you know, and I have a lot of respect, you know, for what you're doing, you know, kind of carrying on with everything. You know, I imagine it's definitely not easy. I mean, I know what it's, you know, I'll just be fully transparent with you. I can relate to the feeling of losing a loved one. You know, a couple of years ago, I lost my dad, and that was, you know, very, very hard on me. And, you know, I'll be honest, like, you know, I'm in college right now, and it's still hard on me. It's like I'm still feeling, you know, that pain and stuff. So I mean, I can relate to you. I'm just trying to feel like I'm just trying to get through, you know, get through each day, you know.
Yeah. You know, Sam, first of all, I'm very sorry for your loss. And even though we get used to it in a certain way, like used to having that as part of who you are now, in my experience, it's not something we get over. We learn how to live with it and move with it. And that will always be a part, of me, that loss. And I'm sure for you, one of the things that I did in this last year and a half relating to yoga and loss for me is I did a grief educator program, because I'm very interested in bringing grief and yoga together, which there are some wonderful people who do that out there, and it's really healing and it's really profound. And so that's part of a piece that I'm pulling into the work that I do as well, because getting some of that to move through the body, getting out of the head a little bit, allowing ourselves to keep grieving however much or long that is, but also to not let it build up, is really something I'm very interested in and passionate about. So yeah, these things are they're forever life-changing for us, but we can find a way. Spiritually speaking, I really credit my yoga practice of practicing and teaching to helping me, because the devastation and the shock of it all was, really intense. And I find that I can connect to him in a way that I don't know that I would have been able to if I wasn't practicing that sort of connection already. Maybe other people would, but I didn't have a particular religion. And so I do a lot of that, I do a lot of talking to him, feeling him, listening for him, looking in the world for him. And it does bring some comfort. It doesn't fill those shoes exactly, but it definitely brings him into my heart in a definite way. And I hope you have something, of your own like that with your dad.
Yeah, of course. I think that's a great thing. How you're able to kind of use yoga and kind of, to where it kind of helps you, with dealing with such, something,
Yeah.
very challenging and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great thing.
Well, I think it's a great thing that you have this podcast, because, I think having something really meaningful and connecting, with people and creative is essential for mental, physical health, even grieving aside. The world is what the world is, and we need to have as many things to look forward to as we can, keep that light on. So good for you.
Oh, well, I thank you, Christine. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me, especially coming from you. And that's my favorite part about doing this is getting to connect with all sorts of different people and getting to hear about, other people's, kind of experiences and stuff, and just
Yeah.
and not in just, I know this podcast, it has like actors and stuff on it, like yourself, but it's it's about just kind of connecting people, having a good conversation stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I know. I think the more ways that we get to do that, the more we reinforce the goodness of humanity. The world is showing us a lot of other sides of humanity a lot. So anytime that we can have that positive light connection, we're doing really, really good work in the world, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm curious, what would you say is kind of your teaching philosophy? Just like what's when it comes to what you do with your teaching. What are the main points there? That you try to hit.
Yeah. Oh, what a good question. Well, one of my very regular students, a couple, just said to me yesterday something that I really love to hear. So I'll share that first and see how else I could answer that for you. But they said that my teaching is spiritual without being dogmatic. And that's really important to me, that I'm just a person who's really passionate, has done a lot of study, done a lot of teaching, made a life of this, and wants to share what I know is good about it. I pay a lot of respect to the country of India, the yoga teachers that have passed this along, made it available to the entire world. I'm not a big fan of the trendy spirituality of kind of, the speak that isn't really coming from the heart, but is sort of on surface level. I know it's well-intentioned. I like people to be themselves and be very real about what they're sharing. And I think that's the best gift any of us have to give. So I don't really put on a lot of airs about my teaching. I don't feel that I know so much more than people. I know some more in yoga than some people who come, certainly that's my professionalism, but about being human, we're all doing it together. And that being said, I really try to be a conduit and not stand in my own way of sharing the philosophy. And I guess in a nutshell, I would say that what it means to me to be spiritual and what comes through my teaching is, if we were only focusing on the physical body in teaching yoga, we're missing a huge piece of what yoga is. And that would be fine. You could do the physical practice and get so much out of it for your body. The science is there and it's huge and it's definite. And I would support anybody who wants just that. But it's sort of like going to a great restaurant and only having, an appetizer, because there's so much more that we can gain, which is self-inquiry. Who am I? Who am I becoming? How am I growing into more of myself? What does it mean to learn more about who I am? And then share that with other people as they learn that. And yoga is about self-study and self-inquiry. And we use the body for that, and we use the breath for that, and we use meditation for it. But it's really getting into what does it mean to be a human being and to fully experience that. So to me, that's the spiritual part of it, is to dive in there. So the way that I teach, I can't really teach any other way, and it's for some people and not for everyone. But I draw a lot of metaphors, a lot of analogies. I like to pull in poetry and music and funny little quips from conversation and quotes and popular culture and all of that as a way to make it accessible and to make it personal and to make it interesting to the practitioner and to make sure that they know why. We're doing this pose because it opens your heart. Why is it good to open your heart? Because we need to be able to access that compassion and that love and that sort of awareness. We're doing this pose because it does this. Not only does it stretch your back, but it makes you stronger, because life brings a lot of crap, right? And we've got to be strong and we have to keep open, So I like to always track it back to why we're doing this and how you can discover more about who you are through it and how it can elevate your life experience, make you have a more expanded time here. And we are not just these little things. It's impossible to imagine, really, if you go far enough into it, that we don't know how our heart is beating or why the breath keeps coming, right? There's a lot of mystery and a lot of magic, and we can assign that to anything that makes us feel good. For me, that connection is like the spiritual realm itself. I'm fine calling it God. I'm fine calling it nature. I love to hear all the different ways that people connect to it. But I think we miss being a full human if we're not both in our bodies and also remembering that we are more than that. So that's sort of why I get up and do
it. So what I think is great is like you were saying, kind of each thing you do in the class, like each thing has a purpose. Each thing serves its own purpose, and I think that's great. It really makes everything that you teach. Everything you teach has an impact. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's good to remember, and you can probably really relate to this with the loss of your dad, and certainly my loss of Gary and other hardships, but especially that, have reminded me that I don't want to take anything for granted. And even on my hardest day, I can look around and see the beauty in life and see something, even if it's a little thing, even on your worst day, to just remain open enough to see something beautiful, to remember that it's a gift to be here. And that takes some practice and it takes some discipline, to remember that this is going by quickly and it's precious. And also we can stretch that quick time out. We can be present and we can make those moments feel longer. And often that's by dropping into gratitude, a mindful awareness around remembering that even these problems that we have while we're here, in a way, and I've got a lot of them, I've got some right now, but in a way you can look at them and say, well, isn't sort of any problem to some degree okay when I'm still here and I still have the opportunity to solve it or to discover something about myself through it? And I'm not Pollyanna all the time. I get mad and I cry. I do it all. But I always like to come back to and make sure that I stay open to the beauty and the goodness and, the next thing I look forward to.
Yep, absolutely. This time we have on Earth, it's a very precious thing, and we just have to kind of, we have to really cherish this, obviously, and just, appreciate every day that we have.
Yeah, I think these days we have been given, every time in history has stuff, but because we're so aware of everything now and we're so connected, through our technology and all of that, we don't get a lot of reprieve from the problems of the world. And when they're coupled with our own problems, it can be too much for any one human to withstand. So to be able to unplug and plug in and connect there and, and beyond helps us get a bigger perspective on the whole thing and really just have that reprieve, and I think in that reprieve, in that space between all of the stuff, that's when our heart, well, there's that quote from Rumi, the crack in your heart is where the light gets in, right? As long as, even if your heart is breaking over and over again, if it stays open, if you're leading from that place, you're going to get the light and you're going to give it, and the light being whatever you want to call it, kindness or friendship or help or support or laughter, humor, whatever is light to you. But we have to make sure that we put that in place, that there is something there for us, whether it's yoga or something else that keeps us connected to that, because I do think we are living in a time that is larger than maybe we were designed to handle.
Yep. I definitely agree. Now this is my last question here, but this I'm really interested in this question. So first off, just kind of again another two-parter here. So first off, just kind of where can people find information about liberation, like online stuff like that, and then to anyone who might be watching or listening to this who is interested in in signing up, wanting to do a class, what can they expect, from like the first class as soon as they walk in or, log on Zoom or whatever?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I would love to share. First of all, you can go to liberationyoga.com. You can also go to our social media, Instagram at Liberation Yoga. You can find me at ChristineBurkeYoga.com also, but that website is kind of dusty and sitting in a corner, and I'm about to bring it out and zhuzh it up, but you can still go on there and see me and, find out a little bit about me there. I am happy to take emails, which is Christine at liberationyoga.com. And I'm really happy to talk to people individually there about how I could help them get started or any questions they have, especially if people feel nervous about it. There's a little anxiety about going in person. There's a little anxiety about going on Zoom. We can have that ice breaking moment that can feel uncomfortable. And that can be whether you've practiced for a long time and then put it aside and you're trying to get back, or never have practiced, or even just starting with somebody new. I understand that very well. So what I would say you can expect to be very welcomed. Expect not to have to prove anything. One of the things I like to say is people will feel maybe like they have to get in shape or be flexible or know how to meditate or breathe before doing the thing. And I say, well, you don't have to know how to learn French before you take, a beginning French class, right? You're going there for that. So yoga is for everybody and everybody. So expect to just come in and explore and be curious. And if you come in with that open beginner mind, even if you've been practicing forever, and maybe even especially then, there may be something that you discovered drew you to this, to me, to the studio, to something new in your life, and to listen to it, to listen to that. Anytime you feel, I'm curious, just follow that. That's divine guidance. And we'll take good care of you. So right now, the studio is open. If I make some shifts and changes, it will remain online. It will remain in pop-up nature classes, in retreats, in trainings. There are all sorts of ways that Liberation continues to give, and I'm very excited to expand on that. And my 2 books, I'd like to mention them if you don't mind, because I think they're really, really helpful also maybe for somebody out there who wants to kind of, dip their toe in a little bit, or for teachers who they use them a lot as inspiration as well. And one is called The Yoga Healer. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. And the other one is The Power of Hand Yoga and Breath. And they're both, you can just look at my name, Christine Burke. And I love these books so much, and I think they can be a really useful tool. There's a lot of little anecdotal stories in them as well, and spiritually connected little pieces. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. And yes, and anyone who's listening or watching, be sure to buy the book and be sure to sign up. So,
Thank you, Sam.
Yes, of course. Well, Christine, thank you so much for letting me speak with you today. It was truly, truly an honor to be able to talk with you.
It was an absolute honor to be with you. I just love your energy so much, and I thank you for being, so just up and open and joy. You're just a joy. So thank you. It's really a great gift. And to anybody who's listening, I hope you take good care of yourself today and always.